I still remember the exact moment everything changed, even though at the time it seemed like such a small, ordinary thing. I was sitting alone at a crowded food court, halfway through a terrible sandwich and scrolling mindlessly through my phone, when I heard a quiet voice beside me say, "Can I sit with you?" I looked up and saw a girl about my age standing there, balancing on crutches, her backpack hanging off one shoulder, and only one leg visible beneath her jeans. For a second I froze, unsure what to say, unsure if I'd heard her right. The entire table area was packed, people laughing, talking, moving around, but somehow, it felt like the noise faded out in that moment. She looked nervous, like she was bracing herself for rejection. I nodded and said yes, without thinking much about it. And if I'm being honest, I thought it would just be a few minutes of awkward small talk before we both went our separate ways. But what happened after that changed my life in ways I never could have imagined. Sometimes I still ask myself if I did the right thing, or if I just stumbled into something bigger than I understood at the time. So I want to ask you something right now. If you were sitting there that day and a stranger with one leg asked to sit with you, would you have said yes? And if you did, would you have been ready for everything that came next? The truth is, before that day, my life was painfully ordinary. I was 23, working a boring office job that I didn't care about, living in a tiny apartment that smelled like instant noodles and old carpet. My days were predictable. Wake up, rush through traffic, stare at spreadsheets, come home exhausted, repeat. I didn't have many friends in the city yet, and most of my conversations were either with coworkers who only talked about deadlines or with my mom on the phone asking if I was eating enough vegetables. So that afternoon when I escaped my office for lunch at the mall food court, it was just another attempt to break the monotony for an hour. I remember sitting there thinking about quitting my job someday, about doing something meaningful with my life, though I had absolutely no idea what that would be. That's when she appeared beside the table. She looked about my age, maybe a little younger. Her hair was tied back in a messy ponytail, and her eyes had this strange mix of determination and shyness. What struck me most wasn't the crutches or the missing leg. It was the way she asked the question so politely, like she had asked it 100 times before and been told no enough times to expect it again. "Sure," I said, gesturing to the empty chair across from me. She smiled, relieved, and carefully lowered herself into the seat. Up close, I noticed the prosthetic leaning against the side of the chair, detached for comfort. She set her crutches against the table and exhaled like she had just finished a long climb. "Thanks," she said. "It's hard finding a seat around here." "No problem," I replied, trying not to stare. For a minute, we ate quietly. I assumed she would scroll on her phone or meet someone soon, but instead she looked at me and said, "I'm Maya." I introduced myself and we started talking at first about simple things, the terrible food options in the mall, the chaos of lunchtime crowds, the annoying music playing over the speakers. She had this warm laugh that made even small jokes feel funnier than they actually were. Eventually, curiosity got the better of me. I didn't want to be rude, but I also didn't want to pretend I hadn't noticed. "If you don't mind me asking," I started carefully, "what happened?" She glanced down at the empty space where her leg should have been, then looked back up with a small shrug. "Car accident, 3 years ago." There was no self-pity in her voice, just a simple statement of fact. "I'm sorry," I said. "Don't be," she replied. "I'm still here." That sentence stuck with me. I'm still here. We kept talking. It turned out she had recently moved to the city for physical therapy and a new job opportunity. She didn't know many people yet, which explained why she had been wandering the food court looking for somewhere to sit. The strange thing was how easy it felt to talk to her. I'm normally awkward with strangers, but with Maya, the conversation flowed naturally. She told stories about learning to walk again with the prosthetic, about falling in public and laughing it off, about strangers who either stared too much or tried way too hard to pretend nothing was different. "At least you said yes," she joked. "Some people act like sitting near me is contagious." That comment hit me harder than I expected. After lunch, we both stood up to leave, and that's when something unexpected happened. As she reached for her crutches, one of them slipped and clattered loudly onto the floor. A few people nearby turned to look. I instinctively bent down to pick it up and handed it to her. Thanks, she said again. Then she hesitated like she was debating something. Hey, this might sound weird, she said slowly. But would you maybe want to grab coffee sometime? I mean, since you're the first friendly person I've met here. I was surprised, but also strangely happy. Yeah, I said. I'd like that. That coffee turned into another conversation that lasted 2 hours. That conversation turned into weekly meetups. And before long, Maya had somehow become the most interesting person in my life. She had this way of seeing the world that was completely different from mine. While I complained about traffic or work stress, she talked about how every step she took on her prosthetic was a victory. She showed me scars on her knee from surgeries and joked about them like they were badges of honor. You'd be surprised how much you can survive, she once told me. As weeks turned into months, I realized something else too. Maya wasn't just strong physically. She had this quiet determination that pulled people in. Strangers remembered her. Baristas greeted her by name. Kids asked questions about her prosthetic, and she answered them patiently instead of getting annoyed. One evening while we were walking through a park, she told me something I didn't expect. You know why I asked to sit with you that day? She said. Because the food court was crowded, I guessed. She laughed. No, because you looked lonely. That caught me completely off guard. I did? Yeah, she said gently. You had this expression like you were stuck somewhere you didn't want to be. She wasn't wrong, and that's when she told me something that changed how I saw everything. After her accident, Maya had spent almost a year in recovery. During that time, one of the hardest parts wasn't the surgeries or the therapy. It was the loneliness. People disappear when life gets complicated, she said quietly. Friends stopped visiting, messages stopped coming, invitations stopped arriving. But sometimes, she added, looking at me, one small kindness can change someone's entire day. Hearing that made my chest tighten, because I realized something uncomfortable. Saying yes that day had felt insignificant to me, but to her, it had mattered. And this is the point in the story where I want to ask you something again. Because at that moment, I faced a choice I didn't fully understand yet. Maya eventually told me about a project she had been dreaming about. Something that could help other people who had lost limbs feel less alone. Something that could give them community and support. But the project was huge, complicated, and risky. It meant stepping out of my safe, predictable life and helping her build something from scratch. So before I tell you what I decided, I want you to pause for a second and think about it. If you were in my position, comfortable job, stable routine, no major risks, would you gamble all of that to help someone chase a dream? Would you have done it? Because that's exactly what happened next. Maya's idea was simple but powerful. She wanted to create a support network for people with limb loss in the city. A place where they could share experiences, get advice, and feel understood. There are thousands of us out there, she said, but most people think they're alone. The more she talked about it, the more passionate she became. I could see the fire in her eyes. But I also saw the challenges. Organizing events, finding funding, building awareness. It was a massive undertaking. Why are you telling me all this? I finally asked. She looked at me for a long moment. Because I think you could help. No one had ever said something like that to me before. At my office job, I was just another employee number. But Maya believed I had something to offer, so I made a decision that honestly terrified me. I said yes. Over the next year, our lives became completely different. We spent evenings planning meetups, designing flyers, contacting hospitals, reaching out to rehabilitation centers. The first support group meeting had only 5 people. But those 5 people shared stories that filled the room with tears and laughter. A veteran who had lost his leg overseas. A teenage girl who had been born without part of her arm. An older man who had struggled with depression after surgery. And suddenly, something beautiful started happening. Those 5 people told others. And those people told more. Within months, the group had grown to dozens. Then something even bigger happened. A local news station heard about Maya's story and featured it on television. Donations started coming in. Volunteers joined. What began as a simple idea became a full community organization. I watched Maya speak at events, standing confidently on her prosthetic, telling crowds about resilience and kindness. Every time she shared the story of the food court, she always mentioned the moment someone simply said yes. And every time I felt a strange mix of pride and humility. Because the truth is, I didn't do anything heroic that day. I just made room at a table. But sometimes that's enough to change everything. Today, 3 years later, our organization supports hundreds of people across the city. We host monthly gatherings, mentorship programs, and adaptive sports events. And Maya, she's become someone I admire more than I can describe. People often ask how it all started. They expect some dramatic turning point or grand plan, but the real answer is much simpler. It started with a quiet question and a simple yes. Looking back, I realized something important. Life doesn't always change through huge decisions. Sometimes it changes through small moments of kindness that seem meaningless at the time. So if there's any lesson in this story, it's this. Don't underestimate the power of being kind to someone who might need it more than you realize. If you were on my side in this story, go ahead and like this video. And if you enjoy hearing real-life stories about how small moments can lead to big changes, make sure you subscribe for more. I'd also love to hear what you think. Would you have said yes if someone asked to sit with you that day? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for listening to my story, and I'll see you all in the next one.